Welcome to this knowledge clip on problem definition techniques. In 30 minutes, I hope to give you a lot of valuable information on all kinds of techniques that you can use to really get to the core of your problem. And that is really important to develop a successful concept for your client. So I hope you are enjoying this clip, and if you have any questions, please let me know. I have my contact information in the last slide. So, problem definition techniques is one of the most important phases of your project, because if you don't have a really smart problem definition, then you will likely encounter all kinds of issues in maybe your ideation phase or in your prototyping phase. So what I wanted to emphasize on is that defining a really smart problem definition is really crucial if you want to develop not only a feasible solution, but also a viable solution. And what I mean with viable and feasible is that feasible is all about getting your solution implemented. So you need to come up with a solution that can indeed be implemented. And viable is that you have to develop a solution that will be used by not only the soldiers, but by all stakeholders that are involved in the MSK. And what is SMART? Well, this stands for specific, measurable, acceptable, realistic, and time. And it's a way to really test if your problem definition is smart. So use this SMART trick as a way to check your problem definition once you have formulated it. So what I wanted to share with you today is some context of problem definition techniques, and also the phase in which you use those techniques. That it's all about diverging and converging, and of course I'm going to share some problem definition techniques as a source for you to maybe select one or two techniques so you can really discover what your real problem is. So as you already know, during the kickoff, you talk to a lot of experts, the client. During the expert panel, you all had a lot of very valuable questions, and you got a lot of information. So by now you are really aware of the fact that the MSK assignment is a really challenging assignment, but also an assignment with a lot of different elements and a lot of different perspectives. So it's not a matter of defining one problem, because there are several perspectives that you have to take in account. So for example, if you look at the whole logistic chain, if you look at the food, there are so many questions you have asked concerning the food, not only about the experience, but also the safety, how we can personalize the needs of the soldiers. You also are aware of the fact that energy is also an issue. So in terms of how can you create a solution that creates an energy source that might be redundant or might be used in different ways. So there's a lot of issues you need to tackle. So if you take all those different perspectives into account, you have to conclude that you have to tackle a really wicked problem. And that's, of course, also very positive and part of the challenge. But that also implies that you have to take a lot of different elements into account when you formulate your problem definition. You have to deal with a lot of different stakeholders, your logistical chain, but also the safety issues concerning the food. So you have to research and explore your problem definition from all kinds of perspectives. So if you look at the mainstream design approach, you see that in a lot of projects, there is a waterfall design approach. And that really means that there's a set of requirements, that is the foundation for your design. Based on your requirements, you develop a design, you implement your design. Of course, you have to test it and also validate it. And of course, you have to maintain what you implement. But if you look at the problem you have to face for the Ministry of Defense, you might already notice that this way of designing might not be applicable for this challenge, because there might be a lot of new insights you will face during your entire challenge. So in this way, in a waterfall design approach, once you have created your requirements and you have created your design, during your implementation, you might encounter all kinds of new insights or problems which you can't tackle anymore because you already created your design. So you need a different approach. And what you can see in a lot of creative and also challenge-based learning processes and courses is that the two-diamond model is a frequently used model. And it's you might already have seen this model. This two-diamond model is called design thinking, and it gives you more flexibility. It's not it's a method, but it's also a philosophy. It's a way of looking at your problem, and not only looking at your problem from different perspectives, but the most important starting point is actually your user. So it's really a user-centered approach to look at your future design. And you start, of course, with empathizing, and that is the phase that you already are in a sense that you have gathered a lot of information. You have collected maybe all kinds of different resources. You might have read the ACT report. You talked to your client. Maybe you interviewed other people. You did a lot of research. So in a sense, you have gathered a very rich source of data, information, experiences, maybe feelings, but also maybe some reluctance due to maybe change. So you have a very rich and enormous source of information. And what you need to do, in a sense, is converge to one problem definition. And that might not always be very simple, in a sense that there might be maybe 10 different problem definitions you can formulate. So this is really not a very easy process because of the richness of your data, but also you have a problem that is multi-diverse and multi-complex. But I hope that I can help you with this, in a sense that there are a lot of different techniques you can use to converge and end up with a good problem definition. And of course, this is not a phase that you have to do entirely by yourself. You can also involve stakeholders. So you can also involve your client. So if you have a problem definition and you want some feedback, you can always contact the client, or maybe ask peer feedback from maybe other teams. So really try to involve all kinds of stakeholders that can help you in defining your problem definition. And the two-diamond model, as you can see, there's two diamonds. The first diamond is, in fact, the diamond that you have to focus on firstly, of course, but where you can use those problem definition techniques. And what's also very important to say is that this is an iterative process. So it can happen, for example, that if you defined or formulated your problem definition, it might be so that the client has feedback that gives you a clue that you might return to your empathize phase or go back to your enormous rich data set or information that you have. So don't see this as a waterfall approach. See this really as an iterative process where you diverge and converge in a circle, in a sense. So don't worry if you end up with a problem definition that might also maybe in the ideate phase, when you start collecting all kinds of different solutions, that you might return to your define phase again. So that is what design thinking is all about. It gives you the flexibility to really use all the information that you gather during your process. Also information that you might be aware of in a later stage of your challenge. So that's very important to remember that. So if we look at the problem definition techniques, I have a favorite set, and I think those problem definition techniques are also really fun to use. And one of my favorites is wishful thinking. And what you do in a sense is you can do this with your team, but also maybe with yourself or with friends or during a walk. And what you in a sense do is you say to yourself or to your team, well, imagine that we had all the power in the world. We had all the magic. So we had the power to really solve the problem, no matter what. We can solve every problem there is. So if you try to think of that you have all that power to solve this problem, what kind of different solutions would you come up with? And of course, you can imagine that you can really think outside of the box and come up with all kinds of great ideas that might not always be feasible, but that's not the point. What the point is that you really think outside of the box, write down all the different solutions you come up with, and really use that information to look at your problem from all kinds of perspectives. And that is really the effect of this technique. So by thinking outside of the box, where you create all kinds of amazing solutions because you have those superpowers, you can really use those outside of the box solutions by looking at your problem definition. So it's really a technique that you have to try. It's really fun also to do it in your team. But there are also other easy to use techniques that don't take a lot of time. So you might know the 5 W's, and that is really very easy to use technique where you make a list based on the 5 W's. So just write down the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. And try to really use that information again to maybe formulate a problem definition or refine your problem definition. And it might also lead you to maybe more questions you want to ask maybe your client or other stakeholders. So it's a way to really look at different perspectives to your problem. Reverse brainstorming is also a very interesting one. It's the same as wishful thinking, but then the other way around. So really, you reverse, in a sense, the problem by making it worse. So you ask yourself, your team members, how could we possibly make the problem worse? And just write down, also, it's a very out-of-the-box technique. Write down every thought you have. It's really important that you write down all the ideas that come up. And it is also a way to really reconsider your problem definition or reformulate it. So it's a really interesting technique to use. I would really recommend it to also use this one. And another favorite of mine is when you have formulated a problem definition, I think it's very interesting to use the 4 whys. And what you do in a sense is you formulate your problem definition, write it down on a piece of paper, on a whiteboard or on a Miro board, and ask yourselves 4 times, why is this the problem? And it's really a way to really downsize your problem definition, because sometimes you think you have a good problem definition, but behind that problem, there's actually another problem. and that might also lead to another problem. And I can assure you that if you use this technique, you might discover that there are all kinds of little, maybe sub-problems behind the problem definition you defined. And if that's the case, really reconsider the way you defined your problem definition, because if your problem definition is too broadly formulated, you will come up with a lot of different solutions, and then you really have to challenge yourself to really converge again to a solution, a concept that is really feasible and viable, what I mentioned earlier. So this is also a very interesting technique. Another one is synonyms, and that is when you also have your first problem definition defined. So what you do in a sense is you formulate your problem definition on paper again, and select all the words that are important for you as a team. And then try to create a list of synonyms based on each keyword you have defined. So on the sheet you see an example. I chose the word healthy, and I created all kinds of synonyms for the word healthy. And as you can see, that it might be a lot of words, but if you Google healthy on the internet, or you create, or you type synonyms healthy in, you can see that there are a lot of different ways you can look at the word healthy. And when you collect this information, it is also a source for you to really look at your problem from different perspectives. So if you look healthy from the perspective of fresh, that's of course completely different than that you look at that healthy food also makes your user, your end user, maybe happy or satisfied. So really try this technique. It's a very easy to use, fun technique, and it's also a way to look at your problem definition from all kinds of different synonyms, and it can help you maybe to refine your problem definition. And it's also a way to use those synonyms with if you have a meeting with your client or with another stakeholder, you can also really discuss if the word healthy means the same to you as your stakeholder, because sometimes you think that you have the same definition of a word, but that might be different. So you can really use that also in your communication with your stakeholders. Another one is a list of requirements, and that is a really basic technique. You can, in fact, make a list with all kinds of demands and conditions that you find or your client find important. And what might be useful is that you prioritize your requirements. And this is also a technique that you do in an interview or with a discussion with your client, or maybe with other stakeholders. So really think of the top 5 demands that are really important, and that the solutions that you will develop in a later stage, those requirements must be met. So that's also a way to really convert yourself into what the real problem definition is. Another interesting way of looking at your problem is to explore what the causes are of your problem. And this is a very well-known diagram. It's a cause and effect diagram. And what you do in a sense is you make a diagram, as you can see in the picture. It's a fish. And you write down several perspectives. So you see here, for example, you can look at skills, but you also can look at materials or methods, the equipment or the people. So you have all kinds of perspectives you can take into account, and really think of what causes the problem. So for example, if you look at the equipment, it might be so, I'm not sure, but it might be so that the MSK is not equipped to really cook fresh food. So if that is the problem, then you know that this is very important aspect of your future solution. Or it might be that the current staff might need more skills to maybe prepare fresh food, for example. So it's a really interesting way to look at the causes and, of course, the effects of, if you could tackle a certain cause or a group of different causes, what would be the positive effect of your solution, in a sense. So, and I would like to end with, this is one of my favorite techniques, it's the 6 head techniques. And it's a very interesting technique because, once again, you look at your problem from different perspectives. And it's a way to really brainstorm with your team once again, or maybe invite one of your stakeholders and use all the heads. So try to use a Miro board where you brainstorm also, because brainstorming is very important in this phase, because this is really about collecting a lot of different perspectives. So if you use this technique and you write down all kinds of possible solutions or things that are important, try not to evaluate instantly, because evaluating and validating your information, you do that in a later stage. So, and it also counts for all the other problem definition techniques. Really, firstly, collect the information, and then afterwards try to evaluate and validate the information with each other. Because if you validate too soon, you might lose very valuable information. So as you can see in the 6 heads, it's from de Bono. It's a philosopher, and he created this technique to help you think in all kinds of different perspectives. And you look, for example, let's see, one of my favorite heads is looking at from the bright side, the positive side. So if you look at the yellow head, you can think of different questions. So, for example, how can we make it work? And you can be really positive. Of course, also here wishful thinking. So if you had all the power to solve this problem, what would be the ideal situation? The reverse brainstorming technique is, in a sense, also here as a black hat. So really try to think of how could our challenge, how could it fail, in a sense, or how could we create a solution that is not financially feasible, for example. But also look at the emotions and the feelings. So that's also very important. And I can remember during the kickoff that a lot of times the emotional perspective of food was mentioned. And that is very important also to look at the problem from that perspective. So use these questions, and of course you can also find a lot of interesting information on Google concerning all the techniques. So, and these are only a few techniques. So there's a lot of other techniques you can use, but I think that with this set you can really start with defining your problem. And what I wanted to once again say to you is that really try to iterate. And if you have a problem definition that might not be formulated smart, just go back to your empathy phase. Look at all the information. Try to involve your stakeholders. And if you need help, you can always contact me. If you have, for example, a session or you want to use a brainstorming technique to formulate your problem definition, then please invite me. I'm really happy to join. And from my experience, this phase is not only important, but it's also a very difficult phase, because the difficulty is that you gather so much information that you sometimes don't know how to convert to a problem definition. And that's also okay, because you are facing a really interesting but a very complex problem also. So don't stress out if you think you're not there yet. So this is really an iterative process. You select the stakeholders, the sources that you need, so get help. You don't have to do this only in your team. So really discuss with each other who you need in order to come up with a good, defined, smart problem definition. I have a few resources. It's a very interesting video on design thinking, so watch it. It's very fun to watch. There are also some resources on different tools and techniques. There's a design kit you can also use. And I also added a source of an impact letter. I did not tell you more about the impact letter, but it's an interesting way of looking at the future impact you want to create. So that's also another technique, but it's more outside of the scope of design problem definition techniques, but it might be helpful for you as a team. So once again, thank you for joining this knowledge clip, and please let me know if I can help you out with your problem definition phase. Good luck.